Gary?
Hello, John. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Wise Fools. I'm Gary Varvel. That's John Branyan right over there.
Mm-hmm. In Gary's sunroom.
And you're in my sunroom, and I'm in the great room, I guess, which is close by. I'm just pointed in a different direction tonight, so.
It's not far. Yeah.
I thought I needed a dark background so my face would show up.
Mm-hmm. It works.
Not that we need to see my face, but.
This is not the Bible study.
I think my white hair. I think my white hair messes up the exposure. That's what I think might be happening there.
What are we going to do about that?
Well, I'm not coloring my hair.
Well, that was.
Yeah.
I think that would. Everybody thinks that Gary should color his hair for the sake of the video. Say so in the comment section.
Are you going to say the thing, or am I going to say the?
No, you're going to say the thing. It's your thing to say.
This is Wise Fools. It's not the Bible study you want. It's the Bible study that you need.
True that. Hijack is here.
Yay.
Laura. Dee Dee's here. Chance. What's up, Chance?
Chance Rogers.
Sherry's here.
Sherry.
Think your laptop was a touch screen? I thought that other people's laptops was a touch screen. Trying to do that. Marilyn's here. Jeff Lane is here. Ray's here.
Hi, Ray.
I'm in virtual watermelon. Christine's here. Nerd Bomb is somewhere right there. And Melanie.
JB Melanie.
She says white hair is cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It's a crown of wisdom. That's what the Bible says.
It's a crown of wisdom. It just messes with the balance on the webcam.
The balance? Yeah, I guess so.
Makes it hard to focus. Sue's here too.
Powder. I'm kind of shiny tonight for some reason.
I'm shiny too, but that's because it's 420 degrees up here in this room. I'm like a rack of snickerdoodles up here.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
John, did you? What were your thoughts on the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard result?
We could do a whole. We could do a whole hour on that. A couple of things. One, I think that Amber was mistaken about how much latitude she would be given by virtue of the fact that she's a woman. I think that she was kind of counting on being able to just say whatever she wanted to say and be believed and not questioned.
Yeah.
And I think that she thought that she was going to go up and stand and make all these wild accusations and everybody was going to bring the hammer down on Johnny. And it didn't work out that way.
You got to put up Hijack Wife's comment there.
Depp now has herd immunity.
She said it's not her joke, but it is funny. I thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So, I think Amber thought she had the Me Too movement. I think thought she had the the wind at her back, and that was going to carry her through. Mm-hmm. Her performance wasn't very good on the stand, I guess. I didn't watch any of it.
I just watch
saw reports about it.
Right.
But I think that was the consensus, is that Johnny was the better actor. But they had her dead to rights, admitting that she said, well, I think of one of the audios, I didn't hit you that hard.
I didn't punch you.
That she hit him.
Right. I didn't punch you. I hit you.
Oh man, that's good.
It's like, take it like a,
that kind of hurt your case though.
The whole thing is sad. It's really sad.
Yeah, it is sad. Very sad.
That you've got these people with enormous privilege, wealth, fame.
Yeah.
They have, by all, they're kings. They're royalty. They're modern day royalty for all intents and purposes. Mm-hmm. And they just can't hold it together. They can't be happy in the midst of all of that opulent wealth. And so I think there's a lesson there for all of us when you
Yes.
when you can learn things from people who have a different life trajectory than you, and you can look at people like the Hollywood celebrities, and that's not to say that all of them are like
Mm,
this, because they're
right.
not.
No.
But you can look at somebody like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and go, okay, they've got materially, they don't want for anything, um,
Right.
but there doesn't seem to be a lot of peace there, and
No,
so
fame and wealth doesn't bring happiness. You can own your own island. I think he bought an island at some point, right? But
yeah, why not?
and world known, everybody knows him. Um, but I it made me think of Psalm 73, which the psalmist says in here, "For I envied the proud when I saw them prosper, despite their wickedness." That sounds familiar. And he
Hmm.
goes on and talks about, how they seem to live such painless lives. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They don't have any troubles like other people. They're not plagued with
Right.
problems like everyone else. And it goes on and on like that. He's complaining. The psalmist is complaining. And then you get to verse 16. It says, "So I tried to understand why the wicked prosper, but what a difficult task it is. Then I went into the sanctuary. Oh God, I finally understood the destiny of the wicked." And that's the sad thing. They may be prospering here on earth, but there's coming a judgment day. And if they don't have a relationship with Christ, they're going to pay for their wickedness. No one gets away with it. I wrote about this week, and in fact, it's going to be in tomorrow in my and I said that we're all sinners before God, but I have Jesus as my advocate, and he paid for my death penalty when he went to the cross of Calvary, and my case has been dismissed. And here's the good news: Jesus is still taking clients. So if you're interested, you just contact Romans 10:13. Anyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. That's, it's an open invitation to anyone. But that, Psalm 73, I think every one of us at one time or another has been there and thought, why do those people get away with it?
Hmm.
Speaking of another trial this week, on Tuesday, Michael Sussman was found not guilty by a jury of 3 Hillary Clinton donors, 1 AOC donor, and a juror whose daughter plays on the same soccer team as Sussman himself, his daughter. So
It truly
that
was a
doesn't.
jury of his peers.
It was. I could see why he was pretty confident that he was going to walk. Uh,
Hmm.
that doesn't, that's typical, I guess, for Washington D.C. So in my column I'm writing, I'm saying that we don't have. I think it's John Adams that said that we are. What do you say? So we're a government of laws, not of men, and our justice is of law. Whatever. I got the quote wrong. I got it right in the column, but I
I
say
would
we're no
hope.
longer a land of laws. It's based on laws. Some people are above the law, and I don't think in any circumstance that I can imagine that some of these people in Washington would ever pay for what they've done. They can lie. You and I can't lie to the
Not on this
FBI.
earth, right?
No, not on this
Right.
earth. That's the point of Psalm 73. There are certain people, even in that day and age, who just get away with it. And in
Right.
this case, I think it was Byron York. Somebody wrote a column, basically said, "Yeah, she got away with it." Oh no, it was Ari Fleischer. Ari Fleischer wrote and said she got away with it. And he said, so now we've learned that all you have to do is hire a law firm, lie to the FEC, make up a big lie against your opponent, and then feed it to the FBI. Oh, and then
Well,
he ends it by saying, "Oh, and join the Democratic Party."
that's what
So
I was going
that
to
was the
say.
key. That
It
was the key.
matters. It matters who you're connected to. It matters your
Right.
affiliations. The laws don't
Right.
matter, but
Exactly.
your relationships do.
Exactly.
That actually, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp thing kind of segues into what we're going to be reading tonight.
Absolutely does. The timing couldn't be more perfect. I think the
The
Lord
timing
was
is perfect.
sovereign in making us It was a good week. It was a good idea to put two of those chapters together one week and kind of
It worked
hustle
out
through them
perfectly,
all.
and
Yeah.
and God brought the trial to an end just in
Yes.
time for our Bible study
Exactly.
tonight. So
Exactly.
we are in
So we're in
Genesis 39.
Genesis 39.
hmm And we can split this
Okay.
up really however you want, Gary. It's your call tonight.
What's it? 23 verses? Is that what it is?
I don't remember, something like that.
I'll take the first 12.
Okay, I'll just take whatever's left.
All right, then. Psalm 39, beginning in verse 1. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was a captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing except for what kind of food he ate, what kind of food to eat. Joseph was very handsome and well-built young man. When Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully, "Come and sleep with me," she demanded. But Joseph refused. "Look," he told her, "my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." But she kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around. When he went in to do his work, she came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, come on, sleep with me." Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house.
Cliffhanger. When she saw that when she saw that she was holding his cloak and he had fled, she called out to her servants. Soon all the men came running. "Look," she said, "my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream, he ran outside and got away, but he left his cloak behind with me." She kept the cloak with her until her husband came home. Then she told him her story. "That Hebrew slave you brought into our house tried to come and fool around with me," she said. "But when I screamed, he ran outside, leaving his cloak with me." Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed.
All right. Well, let's pray. Father, thank you for the reading of your word. I pray that your Holy Spirit would lead us tonight as we discuss these matters, and pray that you'd help us to apply some certain truths from Joseph's life into our own life. We ask it in Jesus' name, amen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a short story, but it's so full of so much stuff. And it also, this probably covers several years, actually, of his life. He gets there, he's 17 when he's sold into slavery. He gets down to Egypt. Potiphar buys him as his own slave. And interesting thing, I noticed that Dave Guzek said that Potiphar, the word actually means devoted to the sun, which means his name was probably connected with some type of Egyptian religious system, sun worshippers or something. Also, he's a captain of the guard, which was almost like Pharaoh's. He was like the chief of his secret police. So he was in a position of responsibility and power. He
He
buys
was doing all
Joseph.
right. Hmm.
He was doing all right. One other thing, too, that is, I guess some theologians have discussed out there historically, if you were an official, and it says that he was an official of the, yeah, he was an Egyptian officer. That's it. If you're an officer, a lot of times the king would make you a eunuch
Mm.
so that you would be more, you didn't have to worry about
You'd be
you.
less distracted.
Exactly. So now we don't know. There's nothing from the text that we can really take from this that he was a eunuch, other than that was the kind of the tradition. I know that when Daniel and his buddies were taken into captivity in Babylon, they made them eunuchs. And we talked about eunuchs a long time ago when we were first starting into Genesis. So it was
Hmm.
kind of a thing that they did back then. So one question was, and this is fast forwarding now, is that when Potiphar's wife is making advances to Joseph, was that, a reason? Maybe, possibly,
Frustration.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. So her husband wasn't as interested in her, maybe, as that she wanted. So anyway, that's kind of that's kind
Mm.
of an opening and a
Mm.
beginning. So, what do you think are some principles from Joseph's life that, John, that we can take for ourselves? What do we see in the text here? One of the things, before we get into that question, though, is remember just a few weeks ago we were looking at Joseph was getting these dreams, and then he was pretty much bragging to the rest of the family, "You're all going to bow down to me,"
Mm.
and it didn't fare well. In fact, his brothers, they were going to kill him, and then that's the reason they sold him into slavery. As I read this text here, it seems like Joseph's matured quite a bit and also been humbled.
Yeah, he's grown up a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean, getting sold into slavery by your brothers might have
yeah,
had a
that would do it.
sobering effect on him. I think that the interesting thing about this story for me now, having heard this story from the time I was a little kid, in Sunday school,
Hmm.
and it's always the focus is on Joseph and Joseph's faithfulness and Joseph's obedience to God and so on that, and so all of that is true. But I think it's interesting that Potiphar uh, brings Joseph in and notices that God is favoring
Yeah,
Joseph and goes, well, I'm going to elevate this guy. So he recognizes that having God's blessing is something that would make Joseph. Uh, you can give him more responsibility. You can put him in charge of
yeah,
everything because God.
yeah,
But this is a pagan. This is an Egyptian
right.
um, pagan, and it's just interesting to me that and this isn't the first time that this has happened, even in the book of Genesis, where you've got
Yeah,
people outside of, they're not God's people, who are recognizing God's favor on people and going, well, your God is smiling on them. But it doesn't cause them to change anything. It doesn't cause
right,
them to
right.
to change. And it happens so consistently that it
Hmm.
almost makes me wonder if maybe the idea of uh, what we understand as evangelism, of converting to a faith, is just not even something that enters their minds at this point. Like the
Hmm.
like the
Hmm.
people are so primitive and and so basic that they're like, well, your God is obviously showing you favor, and so I'm going to give you more responsibilities in my house. But it doesn't occur to Potiphar to start following Joseph's God himself, or to ask
Right.
Joseph.
Yeah,
At least the scripture doesn't record it. He doesn't say,
yeah,
hey, tell me about this Hebrew God of yours who,
yeah, yeah.
he doesn't do that.
I think that is an interesting point. Uh, we saw it with Joseph's dad, Jacob, when Jacob was working for Laban. Laban recognized that everything that Joseph touched produced that God was with him and God was doing this for
Right.
him. And then
Right.
he tried to trick him and tried to keep him there as long as possible. But
Right.
Yeah, so we have seen that with many of the, Abraham the same way,
with
but yeah,
Abimelech, right?
Jacob, yeah, with Abimelech, yeah. So we saw that over and over, and then here we see it again. So God's
Yeah.
favor. So I mean, that's one perfect lesson for us, is that we want God's favor in our life. I think another thing that we see here is that Joseph worked in verses 2 and 3. It talks about the Lord was with Joseph, and so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of the Egyptian master. So he worked. And I think that sometimes we can get into a pity party because we're not where we want to be. I know
Mhm.
in my own life, there were times when I could see people who were my age getting the job that I wanted and I wasn't getting it. And I wasn't progressing like I thought or what I had kind of planned. My expectations weren't being met. And so I was frustrated. This is a lesson for everyone, that no matter where you are, you should just, you have to come to the grips with it. That's where God has put me. And so I'm going to be the best I can be right here. And then if God is pleased, then maybe he moves you, or maybe we have to kind of surrender to what God's plan is for us. But I think that instead of fussing about it, see, this was my idea the whole time I was working. Sometimes, the boss, the editor would have a different opinion from me. Instead of arguing with him about it, I would just go, okay, he's the boss, and God put him there. If I'm arguing with him, who am I actually arguing with? And so I would just surrender to that, and just find out what's a better way for me to do what I need to do that will please the boss. But ultimately, who are we working for? In Colossians 3:23 and 24, it says this: work willingly at whatever you do, as though you are working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that master you are serving is Christ. So if we had that attitude, and this is what Joseph had, he's sold into slavery. Everything that happened to him has been unfair. And John, you and I have talked about this before. Life's not fair, so get used to
Nope.
it. It wasn't fair, but when he got there and he's working for this, he's working for a master. Now he's a servant. He decided, I think, that he was just going to work as to the Lord. And that's when God just blessed him because of it. That should be a lesson for all of us.
Yeah. Christine says a lot of people would like God's favor without following him. That's
Oh
absolutely
yeah,
true.
that's
Um,
true.
I think that we have an idea that there are certain things that are more valuable and more important, certain endeavors that are more important to God. That's sort of the mindset that we come at it. Well, here I'm doing this little unimportant thing, but I'm going to do it as unto the Lord,
Yeah,
so that I will be given something more important to do. But the truth is that God doesn't really need anybody to do anything. So
exactly.
it doesn't matter what your position is and what your job is. It's trivial
Yeah,
in in the scope of all of the things. I mean, God is simultaneously keeping all of the planets in orbit, and keeping all of our hearts beating,
right,
and keeping all
right.
of the animals alive. Everything that is alive now is being sustained by God. He doesn't really need us, to
Yep.
he doesn't need us to find some sort of position or office, to help him. But that's not to say that what we do is not important, because
Mm-hmm.
what is the what's the purpose of man, you know to know God and enjoy him forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever thing you're doing, whether you are a shepherd out in the fields with just you and the animals, or whether you're in whether you're Pharaoh's right hand man, you're supposed to do that thing as unto the Lord. And if you do it as unto the Lord, then it's just as important as anything else. That's because that's
Yeah,
all we're supposed to do. All we're
right.
supposed to do is do what we do is unto the Lord. Everything is a service to the Lord. We're demonstrating to God we're not rendering a service to God. And I know that that's the term that gets used, and it's not wrong, but God doesn't need our service. What he needs is for us to obey him.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's what we're doing in
That's
whatever
what he
our job
wants.
is. We're obeying God, and he's supposed to be glorified by what we do, whether it's small or large.
Yeah.
It's all the same. It's all level. It's all about
So
glorifying God.
Jeff Lane says he did give us work to do. In Ephesians 2:10, it says we are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which He's prepared in advance for us to do. Which is
Hmm.
it's such a great it's such a great verse that we're not just going through life just random and just whatever happens. God does have a plan for each one of our lives, I believe. And as we surrender to him, then he'll reveal his plan for us. And then he equips us to do certain things. I don't think he asks us to do something he hasn't equipped us to do.
Right.
And so I think that's another good point. Now, in the case of Joseph had dreams. I think it's interesting that God was giving him dreams, and then that becomes a thing that is happening throughout his life and interpreting, his interpreting dreams. And and Joseph gives the credit to God. He doesn't take it for himself. We'll see that
Right.
in the upcoming verse and upcoming chapters. But so in verses 4 through 6. Now, here what we're going to see is that, I think we kind of touched on this before.
Hmm.
Um, Instead of Joseph having a pity party, he did accept God's sovereignty in this matter, and he didn't complain, and he didn't wait for a better situation. He just started working, and God blessed him. And here's the other thing: not only blessed Joseph, but the Egyptian got blessed. The whole household got blessed because
Hmm.
of Joseph's faithfulness to God, and God poured blessing into that whole thing. So here's one of the things I see is that God's training. God was training and preparing Joseph for what was going to come ahead. So that's another thing, a lesson I think we can learn from this is that wherever we are right now, this is not the end of the story. So God is doing something in our lives right now that's going to prepare us for something in the future. That gives us hope instead of saying, okay, I'm always going to be right here for all of my life and woe is me. And, instead of that, God has something special and he's using this moment. And I think in one of the cases, one of the things that he's doing with Joseph is he is humbling him because uh, if you a person who has instant success usually can't handle it. I mean, you can see examples in our society today. Young guy hits it big and then all of a sudden flames out because he can't handle the success. He starts doing drugs and starts partying, and it all goes away. Another thing too is Joseph's patience. Like I mentioned before, he was 17, sold into slavery. He becomes prime minister of Egypt at age 30. So we've got like 13 years to go before he gets to the big position that God has prepared him for. And so the lesson there is that God's timing is not our timing. Uh, he takes time for these things to happen. I know that in my own life, I was 17 years old when I met Jerry Barnett, who was the editorial cartoonist at the Indianapolis News. And that's when, in my mind, I thought, this is what I have to do. I have to do this. This is what I want to do. That was 1974. Uh, Now, I did get a job working at the Indianapolis News 4 years later, but I wasn't in the position there I wanted to be. It took me 20 years from 17. I was 37 when I got the job at the Indianapolis Star, and that's as the editorial cartoonist. That's what I always wanted to do. That's a
Hmm.
long time. In the meantime, guys my age had been doing it for 10, 20 years. And so, but I didn't, um, I was never bitter about it. I was not sure that it was ever going to happen for me. I had no verse from the Bible that said, you will be, this is what you're going to be. But there again, I had this prayer a lot. I did this prayer, John. Um, Lord, you gave me this ability. You gave me the desire, I think. Uh, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where this is leading. And I'm sure that's probably maybe something similar with you. I don't know what your path was like with the comedy thing, but God gave you the gift of humor, gave you the gift of being able to tell jokes and think up jokes, and not everybody has that ability.
Mm-hmm.
I know you think you can train people to do it. I
No,
think
I
I can
can't. I
teach.
can't. I can't train people to do it. You can't train people. They have to have a certain amount of ability.
They do, right?
God
Yeah.
decides who has a sense of humor, and who has a sense of humor that's active, and who has a sense of humor that's more passive, where you can appreciate a joke,
Yeah.
or you can appreciate something that's funny after it's been done, versus
Yeah.
you can anticipate what's going to be funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would.
Put up what Jeff Lane just said.
He was a paper boy for the Star.
No, before that one.
Oh, I thought that's what you wanted. Wonder if Potiphar regretted putting him in jail when he lost a blessing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
wonder if he
I would like to
noticed.
know the rest of the story. I wonder what happened to his household after he gets rid of Joseph. What did the I think I would have to think the blessing went away. Maybe his crops didn't do as well. Maybe his servants all flamed out. I don't know, but it
I
seems
don't know.
that would be interesting to
I
know.
don't know. It probably wasn't. I mean, we have no idea. It's pure speculation, but it probably wasn't a like he went to rags. He probably didn't go. He
Yeah.
was living in the street and
Well,
destitute and everything. Because that
no.
goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's wicked people and the ungodly people
Yeah.
do seem to prosper despite their wickedness. And so Potiphar probably didn't have the same. He probably suffered some, but my guess is that he found another person to take care of this household, and that
Now
person probably wasn't as
here
good. But
for me, this is the great part of the story, and this is a spoiler alert. But so he puts Joseph in prison, and we don't know what age that happened, but I think it was like 5 years later. Then Joseph is now his boss. I think that's a great.
later
So
on, yeah,
later on, so Joseph now is his boss.
yeah.
So you're serving me, Potiphar. Okay, good.
Well, can we talk about Potiphar's wife?
Yeah, well, one thing before we get to his wife,
All
one
right.
other thing about Joseph's diligence. Not only he gets there, he's working hard. He has to learn the Egyptian culture. He has to learn the language. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of stuff that he had to do that's really not in the text. But we just know in order for him to succeed, he's got to be able to speak the language, obviously, and he's got to know what their customs are. I think that. I think it's such a lesson to us that we have to work hard. One other thing too, it says that he's beautiful. It says he's handsome.
Mhm.
Right. Uh, According to Dave Guzik, and I haven't studied, everything, but he pointed out that only David and Absalom were the only two other men written about as handsome or beautiful. So Joseph, David, and Absalom were the only men who were described as really good looking.
Who had to struggle
And
with that
so
physical beauty?
the point is, so every gift that we have is a gift of God. Even the gift of having, a beautiful appearance is a gift from God. And see, here again, a lot of people in our day and age, we see on, the beautiful people who are on TV or in movies and all of that kind of stuff. Their beauty, you don't get to keep that, because when you get old, that goes away. But the other thing too is they abuse it. It's a gift they take for granted. They think it came from them. They didn't have anything to do with that. God gifted you with that. They can do all the makeup and all that stuff that they want, but God gave them the looks.
He
And
was
so I just
ridiculously
thrown that
good
out.
looking.
Ridiculously. Okay.
That's from Zoolander. Really, really,
Yeah,
really
right.
super ridiculously good looking.
Okay, that's good.
Um,
Okay,
so,
verses 7 through 10, resisting temptation. Here we go. Go ahead. Let's talk about Potiphar's wife.
well, I think that Potiphar's wife is also a person that we can learn from, just like we can learn from
Yes.
Potiphar, and we can ponder why it was that he didn't ask David about his God. What was it that motivated Potiphar's wife to go after David? And is it really that much different from the Amber Heard story in terms of here's a person who has who has everything. I mean, she's got wealth and
Yeah.
she's got power and she's got influence and she has standing in the community. And she wants to sleep with this Hebrew slave. So
Yeah.
she wants to get that also. And because
Yeah.
she can't have that, she doesn't care about all the rest of the stuff. She
Yeah.
doesn't she has to have that one thing. And why
Right.
does she want to have it? I would say that it's the same thing that happened to Eve in the garden when the serpent came down and said, "Hey, this fruit is pretty good looking, isn't it? You know what? You're not really going to die. It just means you're going to be wise. You're going to be like God,
Yeah.
knowing good from evil."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Eve looked out at the garden that she had. It was a whole garden.
Right.
She could have it was all for them.
Yep.
She could have everything in that garden. But what did she do? No, I want to have this. I want that
Yep.
one thing that I'm
That you
not
can't
supposed to
have.
have. That's the
Right.
thing that I want. And it just it she could not handle that he wouldn't sleep with her with
Yep.
all of the stuff that she had. And
Yep.
it just frosted her that she couldn't
Yep.
have the thing that she wasn't supposed to have.
That's an excellent point. And so she wanted the thing that she couldn't have. And the one of the things that I read was that it was kind of a reputation of Egyptian women that they were a little immoral, a little loose, I guess. So this was not a uncommon thing, I guess,
Mhm.
for them in that culture. Joseph was handsome, so she was attracted. It is possible that Potiphar was a eunuch in order to become an officer. I don't know. All of
Right.
these things could enter into it, but she seemed to want Joseph, and the more he rejected her, the more she wanted him. Uh, and then it seems like from the
Ray thinks
text that
that it
she,
was just a thing that she did, that she was like, she just did that with all the slaves. That's kind of
yeah,
what,
I don't know.
well,
So
Mrs.
here's,
Potiphar, I know how she is. Yeah. Here's the thing that I've wondered. Uh,
yeah,
and I'm just going to say right up front, this is completely inappropriate. Okay. So that's just on the table. But what do you suppose Potiphar's wife looked like?
yeah, that's a good question. So we
Do you
always,
suppose she was smoking hot, or do you think she was
so
a little on the
I don't
homely
know.
side?
So we credit Joseph as being, a man of
Resisting
great
temptation.
and it's possible that she was homely.
That
We
she
don't
was not a
know.
temptress. Now,
I wish that Moses would have told us a little more information about her,
well,
but
he still resisted temptation from the
he did.
standpoint of she was his she was in a position of authority and she could
Yeah,
undo him. And so the temptation was to succumb to her wishes so
yeah,
that he wouldn't lose his position. Um,
right,
but yeah,
right.
I've often wondered if maybe he was like, huh, if maybe it wasn't all that hard to resist her advances.
Which means that when Potiphar comes home and hears that Joseph put a move on his wife, he probably was rolling his eyes and
He was like, he seemed smarter than that.
yeah. So we don't know, but here's a verse for us that we need to keep in our minds here. If you in 1 Corinthians 10, 12, and 13, and the first of it says, if you think you're standing strong, be careful not to fall. The people who say, hey, I got this, when you think you're strong, that's where you're weak. And so then it goes on and says, the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He'll not let you be tempted to be more than what you can stand, but when you're tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure it. He'll show you a way out. So he's not saying, what God is doing is he'll allow temptation to come into your life, but it's not any different than anybody else has ever experienced. And he's not going to allow you to be tempted beyond what you can endure or withstand, so that he gives you a way out. The problem is most people, not most people, a lot of people don't seek the way out, don't take the way out. I had a guy say to me one time, he says, I know this was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I said, You could have helped yourself. You refused to help yourself. You could have done this. You could have gone there. You could have stayed away. Somebody said once that the problem is that, oh, it was Spurgeon. Spurgeon said this: when I regard God as a tyrant, I thought sin a trifle. But when I knew him to be my father, then I mourned that I could ever have kicked against him. When I thought of God as hard, I found it easy to sin. But when I found that God was kind, so good, so overflowing with compassion, I smote my breast to think that I could ever have rebelled against one who loved me so and sought my good. That's Spurgeon said that. So I think that's a good point. When we think of God as some tyrant, well, then what's our natural reaction? I think our human reaction is to rebel against that. But when we think about God as this loving Father who's sacrificed for us for our good, and he seeks our good, well, then I feel bad. We should feel bad if we are sinning against him. But God allows us, gives us a way out. And in this case, Joseph took the way out. He ran, he fled.
Right.
He also, here's what Joseph did. His response, he called it sin right up front. He said, how can I do this great sin and sin against God?
Who? Against God. That's what
against God.
If I sleep with you, I'm sinning against God.
Yeah. And he also said he didn't compromise his moral values, and say, well, that's the boss's wife, so I got to do whatever the boss's wife says. He let it be known.
That's why he said, because I can't sin against God. He didn't even mention Potiphar. He didn't say, I'm not going to do this thing and betray the trust of my employer. He said, no, he went right above Potiphar's head and said, I'm not going to do this thing because it would displease God.
That's another thing too, especially if we're an employee in a workplace, is that don't be shy about letting it be known that you believe in God, that you serve a God. I think there's a tendency in our culture today to think that's a no-no, that you don't ever say anything about that. I don't know why that is.
I don't know either.
But
if you've got an employee who genuinely believes that he is going to be accountable for his behavior and his activity to a authority even higher than yours, is that going to be a black mark, or is that going to be a positive? Is that going to be a negative or a positive for that employee?
Exactly.
I would think it would be a positive.
Right.
It's like, this guy knows this guy is going to behave himself even when I'm not looking, because he answers to a higher authority than me. And so, you're going to be like Potiphar. You're like, I can turn over my whole household to this guy, because he's worried about what God thinks. He's not worried about what I think. He answers to God.
Another thing that this is wise counsel for everyone today too. There's another thing that Joseph does in verse 10. He says, she kept putting pressure on him day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. That is another big thing. So you've heard of the Mike Pence rule, which actually was Billy Graham rule before that was the Mike Pence rule. And that is, I don't go to lunch privately with a woman who's not my wife unless my wife is with me.
Right.
I think that's wise counsel.
Right.
And so I wrote about that when I was at the newspaper, and I had somebody who was at the newspaper, woman, who got really ticked.
I sort of remember that.
She wrote me an email, and she wanted to meet with me, and she was so angry because
privately over lunch.
No. But she just wanted to meet me face to face, and I was working at home a lot. And I said, next time I'm in the office, be happy to talk to you about it. But I said, look, I'm not saying that this should be the rule that Star upholds. I'm saying personally, this is where I am. I love my wife. I admit that I am attracted to women, and so I don't spend any time with them. I don't want to accidentally start to have feelings for someone. Okay. Right. And so I think that, anyway,
it's just not a good idea, even from the standpoint, because you don't know if the woman you're going to lunch with is going to be trustworthy, or if you're going to go to lunch with Potiphar's wife,
Exactly.
And just for your own protection, if you go to lunch with Potiphar's wife, it's not going to end well for you no matter what happens. So.
No, because because she's not truthful. And all it
Right.
takes is the accusation. It doesn't have to be true. Now, I know during the Me Too movement that we were supposed to believe all women. Well, I immediately thought of Potiphar's wife when I
Right.
heard that. I thought, wait a minute, you can't just we are all sinners. You can't just take somebody's word because they say it.
Because they're a woman.
You got to have
Right.
you got to have some witnesses. You got to have something that's more than that. But so
Well,
this
and
is what he kept out of her way, and I think that's wise counsel.
I think that there was a story. It wasn't widely circulated. I don't even remember exactly where I saw it, but uh, there was a. I'm going to try to clean this up and make this as PG as possible. There was a guy on Tinder, and Tinder is a hookup app,
Yeah,
basically.
right,
I've never
right.
used it. I don't know exactly how it works, but from my
I've heard of it.
understanding,
Yeah.
you can just kind of pick people, and if they pick you back, then you just go and hook up with these people and sleep together, and that's what Tinder is. And so this guy had some sort of sexual relations with who he thought was a woman. This guy represented himself, but it was a dude. It was a guy who was a trans person, and he represented
Yeah.
himself as a woman. And so he hooked up with this guy. When the guy found out that he had actually been, I mean, they didn't obviously go. It was oral, and so when he
Uh,
found out, because you would know otherwise, and so he went back when he found out that the guy was a guy. He went back and beat him to death, and
oh,
so that came to trial, and the trial it's totally bizarre. But I'm looking at it, as an observer from outside, and I'm saying to the guy who was tricked, it's like, well, this is what you get for being reckless and stupid. I don't have any sympathy for the person who is lying and deceiving people, but I don't have much sympathy for this other guy either. I think that they were both serving their carnal needs, or serving themselves,
right.
their own
Put up
physical
put up uh, put up
urgent needs.
hijack wife's comment. That's a
It's a
man.
man,
It's a
baby.
man, baby. Uh,
That's the second
so
movie reference we've gotten so far tonight.
yeah. So
That's a
John,
man, baby.
it's been several years ago, but I knew two different guys, and both of them left their wives. So I confronted them, and they had fallen
Mm.
for someone else,
Mhm.
independent of one another. They didn't know that the other person said this to me, but they both said the same thing. They said, "Gary, I never thought this would happen to me." And
Right.
I said, "Well, that's where you and I are wrong, because I have always been afraid this would happen to me. And that's why I don't ever get in a situation
Right.
to give that a chance. That
Right.
you don't linger close to the situation that may get you in trouble. You off at a distance, be friendly, but don't be so close that all of a sudden things start going another direction. You
I
just don't do it. I love my
Yeah.
wife, and so you have to say no to everything else.
Yeah.
Joseph's not married here. He's a free agent, but he
Not really.
recognizes what Potiphar's wife is off limits, so she's not fair game.
Well,
Um,
if you grow up with standards,
yeah,
it's easier.
Well,
It's easier, and
what you just
parents
said,
need
that's
to
right.
instill those standards in their children. I grew up, and it was just a given that certain things you didn't do until you were married, and once you got married, that was forever. And that was
Yeah,
what was modeled for me. Um and and so it wasn't even, I never even questioned it. I never reached a point in my life where I said, well, this seems kind of backwards and stupid and regressive. Why don't we it was just what I thought to be
mhm,
true, and it has saved me. I don't know how many perils I have avoided because I'm not on Tinder. I've never been a guy to go out and just be
yeah,
reckless.
yeah.
And so
Well, John, I had a guy say something or that I knew, and he said something to me about he was divorced, And I said, well, wow, when did that happen? He said, oh, it was just recently. I said, what? Can I ask you what happened? He said, Facebook. I said, what? He said, my wife started messing around with Facebook and found somebody that she went to school with years ago. And that guy was divorced. And all of a sudden they started a relationship on Facebook. And then she left
Mm.
him. And see, that's what I'm talking about. You are lingering in an area that's going to get you in trouble. And that's the problem. So I think for
Well,
young people,
it's not.
Second Timothy 2:22 says, "Flee youthful lusts," and I think that that's wise counsel. That's what Joseph did. Go ahead.
It's not wise to uh, to take up. It's not wise to leave a mate that you have a covenant with
Yes,
for another person, particularly if that other person is in a covenant. Because what is
right.
that person telling you? And what are you saying to that other person? This covenant is of no value to me. And
Yeah,
I'm going to go where I want and do what I want in the
right.
moment. And I have no regard for the promises that I've made. And
Yeah,
you're a fool if you think that that is not going to happen with you. I
right.
have several friends who have been married multiple times, and it's similar to
Hmm.
what you're describing. It's like, well, we drifted to this other person, we drifted to that other person. It's like
Right.
you're just not wise, because
Yeah.
that is a pattern of behavior. That's not something that's going to happen just once, because
So yeah,
you can fall in love a dozen times in your
you
life if you
you
choose
can.
to.
So here's the other lesson too. We have to make this decision about whether to flee, to say no, all of that. That has to happen way before you actually get in the situation. You have
Right,
to decide ahead of time. If this ever occurs in my life, the answer is no,
right,
and I'm gone. I'm out.
right.
So that's
Well, Depp was married 14 years and left that wife for Amber Heard. Yeah, that happens in Hollywood all the time. And
yep,
there's
yep,
and you look at them, and again, this doesn't apply to all Hollywood people, but it's a lot of them. It's an awful
yeah.
lot of them. Are they happy? Are their relationships healthy? Are they doing okay? Most of the ones who were in Hollywood and are still making it didn't remain in Hollywood. There's a few exceptions, um, but almost yeah. I'm all of the long-term relationships in Hollywood. If one of the members of the couple, if one of the couple is a celebrity, a superstar, then the spouse almost always never is. The spouse is
Hmm.
always somebody who's outside of the Hollywood uh, doings, and I
Hmm.
think that makes a difference too. But
So let's
it's a
look
commitment.
at let's look at verse 14. This is what Potiphar's wife did after Joseph flees, leaves his coat behind, his cloak. She's called out to her servants. Soon all the men came running. Look, she said, my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. I think the New King James says mock us.
Mhm.
She doesn't name him. She calls him a Hebrew slave. She now has dehumanized him, and
Mhm.
then she accuses him of rape. She screams. She said, "Left his cloak behind." So then, when her husband gets home, then she tells him that Hebrew slave you've brought into our house tried to come in and fool around with you. So now she's blaming him. So
Right.
so she has deflected blame, and again, she doesn't name him. She doesn't name Joseph. She just says the
Right.
Hebrew slave.
Hmm.
Uh, Potiphar in verse 19 was furious when he heard his wife's story. Now, some are curious. Was he furious because his wife? Was he furious at his wife, or because he knew she was making this up? That depends again on what she looked like.
Hmm.
Or was he really truly upset with Joseph? I read somewhere that the penalty for this was death. But Potiphar didn't put Joseph to
I was
death. He
going to
put him in
say, it
prison.
seems like, yeah, if he was super furious, he would have had him killed.
He would have had him killed, and he didn't. He put him in prison. And so you have to think that maybe Potiphar, maybe he wanted to save face. Now, all of his men in his compound. Now they all know the story that his wife's told. So he's on the spot.
Right.
He doesn't want, so everybody is believing her. So he goes with it and he gets rid of
Or not.
Joseph, which,
They might not have
yeah,
believed her,
maybe,
but he still had to
maybe
say
not,
faith. He still had to do
but he had
something.
to, yeah.
And
Well, in order
my
to,
guess is he
to
probably
have,
liked Joseph. He probably liked him. He'd
he
been
probably
he'd been
did. How
running
could you
his
not?
household for a couple of years and doing it
And he's
well.
doing well. He's making
Yeah,
money. So,
he probably
but
liked him. It was probably not an easy decision for poor Potiphar to have to
it,
throw Joseph in prison.
here's the other thing too, is you don't see anywhere in here where Joseph says, no, that didn't happen. He doesn't, he's silent. And it made me think, he doesn't defend himself. It made me think of in Isaiah 53:7, also Matthew 27:13-14, Jesus was silent before his accusers.
Like a sheep being
And
sheep.
so in
Right.
that case, Joseph is like
Christ.
Jesus. He's a type of Christ in that he's represented here, unfairly accused, lied about, and he doesn't make excuses. He doesn't defend himself. He allows, and I think again, he's so trusting in the Lord. He recognizes God has brought this into my life. It's not fair, and ultimately we're going to see everything that's been happening to Joseph is not fair. And we're going to see in prison, also it's something happens. It's not fair there either, but he recognizes later on that what people meant for evil, God intended for good. And I think that's a big lesson that we're going to keep coming back to in his life. We can apply to our lives, is to think that people are going to do mean stuff to us. They're going to treat us bad. They're going to say terrible things about us. God intends good out of it for us. And so and a lot of times we don't know what it is. He couldn't see what good was going to come out of this. He went from being a servant to now he's in prison.
Mm-hmm.
But he just trusted God.
Right.
Great.
Well, they had a different system. They had a different system of justice than what we have. There was no way that a Hebrew slave was going to be able to go to Egyptian court against the captain of the Egyptian army and his wife.
No, absolutely.
And get a fair shake.
Point. That's a great point.
So it didn't really matter what he said. There was no reason to argue with her. He was not going to win.
No, he was not going to win. And so instead of fussing about it or making it worse, he just kept silent.
Mm-hmm.
And it must have been hard to do. But
can you imagine Potiphar's wife saying, "Are you calling me a liar?" Can you imagine how that would have worked out for Joseph?
It wouldn't have gone very well.
Are you saying I'm a liar? So
at some point you stop digging the hole that you're buried in.
There's wisdom in that. There's wisdom in assessing the situation, and there are some times when it makes sense for me to just let this go. And then there's other times when Paul did it when he was imprisoned and beaten. They put him in prison and they flogged him. And then they're like, whoops, maybe we shouldn't have done that. So they went in to unlock him and send him out. He goes, they were getting ready to flog him. And he said, is it okay for you to flog me, being as how I'm a Roman citizen and all? And then they're like, what? What the what? And so they put him in prison. And then they came in and said, yeah, you're free to go. And he goes, no, you're going to escort us out. You're going to walk us out of here.
That's good.
And
so I also remember when they were in Philippi and they were beaten, imprisoned in there. And what were they doing? In the evening, they were singing. Him and Silas were singing in the prison, singing the Psalms. And then the earthquake happened and nobody left.
There. Right.
They all just stayed there. I think that's interesting. Notice in verse 21 here in our text, it says, but the Lord was with Joseph in prison and showed him his faithful love, and the Lord made Joseph a favorite in the prison with the prison warden, and so the warden put him in charge of everything in the prison. I don't know what that would have been, but it's interesting that everywhere Joseph went, he got put in charge of things because the Lord was with him. Man, we want the Lord with us. And if you're a born again Christian, you have the Lord in you. You have the Lord, the presence of the Lord in you. So you have the Spirit of God, and if we just get out of our own way, I think.
Well, you got to do what Joseph did, though. You have to actually
you do.
stand up, and you have to actually not sin. You have to be
Exactly.
faithful. And we
Exactly.
want the Lord to be with us, but we still want to sin. That's what Christine was saying. We want to be able to.
Yes, right.
We want the Lord to be with us no matter what we do, and it's never worked
Exactly.
that way.
Exactly. It doesn't work that way. He wants us to be holy because he's holy. He wants us to be like Christ now, not when we're resurrected, not after then. Then he'll do the work, but what he's working with us is the divine human cooperative where we're working with the Lord. The Lord is changing us and molding us to be more like Christ, but he wants to do it now. He wants the world to see him through us. And you can see the Lord through Joseph's life here and how he's like Christ in the way he acts. The Lord's with him and he works hard, and he does, even though he's working for wicked sinners, he does what he does and it blesses them because the Lord is with them. And that's just a great lesson. I tell you, John, I so much enjoyed this chapter as opposed to last week. Last week, I didn't like last week's very much, and I think the Lord understands why. I mean, it was here we had Judah deciding, okay, I haven't been with a woman for a while. My wife's dead. There's a prostitute. How much?
Right.
It's like, and then Onan, who's just using his sister-in-law for sex, is like, oh man. But here we have.
You like the stories of virtue. You don't like the stories of corruption and sin.
This is better.
Evil.
Even though things go terribly wrong for Joseph, he is such an example to all of us on how we should live the Christian life. It's an encouragement. And it's possible for us. It's possible for us if we are like Joseph, then God will bless.
We're going to let the media know Gary didn't like a chapter in the Bible.
Yeah.
Gary Varvel renounces his faith during
I can see that. That would be the typical headline for the liberal newspaper.
He is deconverted. It's all a hoax. None of it's real.
Deconstructed. I haven't deconstructed, folks. It's just that there are some verses in the Bible that are some chapters in the Bible that are a little more fun than others. You get into the book of Revelation, there's a lot of things not fun about the book of Revelation, but it's the only book that we're told that if you read it, you will be blessed for reading it. So I read it.
Still hard to read.
I like to read it.
I skip over a lot of Leviticus.
Leviticus, yeah. That's some hard reading right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's some tough reading.
Yeah, just being honest.
All right. So here's the headline: John Branyan tears out whole books of the Bible he doesn't like.
Yeah,
that's the liberal way.
Well, I don't do that.
Sherry says on Babylon B. Yes, right.
Yeah. All right. Next week, 40. Are you okay with 40?
I'm okay with 40. Yes. Okay. Still, I mean, the story carries on and it gets even more interesting.
It's going to be in prison next week. So,
right.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Hanging out.
Everyone.
See everybody next week.